Okay, welcome back. Hope you're all suitably filled with pizza and drinks. I'm now going to introduce you to John Blackbourn. John is one of the core developers for WordPress. He's been building and working on the platform for over 12 years. He's a member of the WordPress security team and was a release lead for 4.1. John tonight is going to be talking to us about WP-CLI, so please give him a big round of applause.
Thanks everyone. Hopefully I'm going to burn off 500 calories as well this evening. If you want to follow me on Twitter tonight, my handle there is John Billion, and I'm going to tweet out a few links and things, so don't worry about writing down URLs and whatever. I'm going to tweet out a few links. What do you think of when I say the WordPress interface? And what's the first kind of thing that pops into your mind? This is probably this, right? The admin interface, lists of posts and stuff. This is actually just one of the ways that you can interact with WordPress. There's a whole bunch. The admin area is one. If you're a developer, you can interact with WordPress through AJAX calls, REST API calls, XML, RPC. If you read feeds, you interact with WordPress through RSS feeds. Most people interact with WordPress through the themes and the APIs that the themes provide. And there's also leaving a comment. All of these are kind of ways of interfacing with WordPress. What I'm going to talk about tonight is WP-CLI, and this is the command line interface to WordPress. It's a way of reading and writing data to WordPress on the command line. This is a description from the project's website. It's called, the project's goal is to offer a complete alternative to the WordPress admin. For any action you might want to perform in the WordPress admin, there should be an equivalent WP-CLI command. If you want to find out everything about WP-CLI, it's all at this website, wp-cli.org. WP-CLI is a separate project from WordPress. It kind of falls under the umbrella of WordPress, but it's separate. It's a package that you install separately. I'm not going to go through the installation of WP-CLI. It's relatively straightforward. All of the instructions are on the WP-CLI website. There's also a bunch of hosts these days that automatically include WP-CLI. One of the sponsors, actually, SiteGround, I know for sure that all of their packages include WP-CLI. So even though it's quite a technical tool, you don't really have to worry too much about the installation. It's fairly straightforward. This is WP-CLI. It's not very intuitive, really. It's not really that user-friendly. Not quite as pretty as the admin area, depending on your point of view. So, of course, because it's a command line tool, it's not very intuitive, so you need to learn how to use WP-CLI before you start using it. The best way to do this is to use the built-in help. In order to start using WP-CLI effectively, you should really use the help quite often and get used to using it. So one of the ways you can do this is with the WP help command. If you simply type that into a terminal, WP-CLI will show you a list of all of the commands that are available. It will show you a description for them and it'll help you get started. You can also type WP help and then one of the command names, and it again will show you all of the details for that command. It will tell you how to use it. And if you're halfway through typing a command and you suddenly remember that you don't remember all the rest of the commands, you can just tack --help on the end, and again it will show you the commands, the syntax and the description for those commands. And there's this slightly lesser known feature in WP-CLI called interactive mode. If you type out a command and then put --prompt on the end, it will actually prompt you for all of the available arguments for that command. So if you've got a great big long command, you don't have to remember all of the parameters. Use --prompt and it will prompt you, say what's your email address, what's the title. So before you even start using WP-CLI, if you get used to using these, the WP help command and the --prompt flag, whenever you get stuck or whenever you find that you've got no idea what command you're looking for, you can use these, and all of the documentation that is right inside WP-CLI will be there available for you to read. There's also some great online documentation. So the documentation for WP-CLI is inside WP-CLI, and it also powers the documentation on the website. You can get to that from WP-CLI.org and then click on the handbook link. That will show you the installation instructions. It will tell you everything about the project. It will give you some good tips on how to effectively use WP-CLI. And there's a complete online command reference if you click the commands link in the top of the website, and that is basically the online representation of the WP help commands. So if you bear those in mind, when you start using WP-CLI and you're not really sure of what commands are available, you can quickly jump into the help and hopefully get unstuck. This is the command structure of WP-CLI. It generally follows the structure of a noun followed by a verb. So for example, WP user create, this command creates a user. WP post meta add, this adds meta to the post. WP plugin install, this installs a plugin. That's mostly true, but not always. For example, the WP import command doesn't follow that structure, and there's a search replace command. Generally, again, if you're a bit stuck, you're not quite sure of the syntax, most commands follow the noun verb format. So there's two ways of using WP-CLI. Probably the most common, or the most usable for beginners anyway, is by typing commands in the terminal on your computer, one-off commands. For example, this command here called WP user create creates a user and adds them to your WordPress website. So you can pass in a couple of parameters for the username and the email address and the role, and that immediately creates a user on our website. WP plugin list, this is a command that literally lists the plugins available on your site. So you can see this nice table here with the plugin names, and status and the version number. It's kind of the same information that you get from the plugins screen in the admin area. But there's also another way of using WP-CLI, which is by scripting it, for example, in a bash script. And this is typically used for automation, for repeating tasks instead of just one-off tasks. This is the top of a script which downloads WordPress, so you can actually use WP-CLI before you even install or download WordPress. And then it starts to set up the configuration file for WordPress. You can also install WordPress and set it up. You can do all of this through bash commands, which are put together into a script, and then you can use these as part of automation, or you can simply call these scripts if you need to do them repeatedly. A good use case for this script is if you're building websites for clients, you've probably got a standard-ish setup process. You want to download WordPress, install it, maybe put a theme on the site, create a child theme, install some plugins that you always use on all of your client sites. Instead of having to do that through the admin area, you can do that with WP-CLI and a script that looks pretty much like this. So WP-CLI claims to be a complete alternative to the WordPress admin. This is mostly true. You can pretty much do everything in WP-CLI that you can do through the admin area. What I'm going to do is take a look at some of the admin screens in WordPress just at a high level and show you some of the common commands that correspond to the admin screen. So this is the post screen in WordPress. Typically it lists posts on your site. So there's a command in WP-CLI called WP post list, and that gives you a list of the posts on your site. But from this screen you can also add a new post, and there's a corresponding command in WP-CLI called WP post create. It takes some parameters such as the post title or the post content, and there's a command called WP post edit. This is an interesting one, which will actually open the editor that you've configured on your command line, and you can type out a WordPress post on the command line and save it. You can also manage categories and tags from this screen, and there's corresponding commands in WP-CLI, for example, to list the categories on your site and to list the tags on your site. Media, well, we've got WP post list, except this time we're going to pass in the post type of attachment. These arguments generally look like the arguments you use in a WP query if you're a developer and you're familiar with those arguments. There's an interesting command here called WP media import. This is for adding media to your site. One of the shortcuts that WP-CLI provides is you can give it a URL, and then what it will do is it will go off and download that image from the URL and import it into your media library straight away. If you wanted to do this manually, you'd have to view the image in your browser, you'd have to right-click it, do save image as, save it to your computer, then go to the media uploader, find the image, upload it. This is a nice shortcut that WP-CLI has got. And also another handy one called WP Media Regenerate. If you've changed your thumbnail sizes and you need to regenerate your thumbnails, this command will go and do that for you. Again, you can't do that in the admin area. WP-CLI will allow you to do that. Pages, well, these are pretty much the same as posts, except the post type is different, so we can pass in the post type parameter again. Again, with WP Post Create, just pass in the post type parameter. Comments, again, this is all looking fairly similar because of the noun-verb structure. You have WP comment list. Interestingly, through WP-CLI, you can approve particular comments with a command. You can mark them as spam, very much the same as you can do in the admin area. Appearance, again, this is a bit repetitive, but you can kind of see the familiarity with the commands. WP theme list, it's the same structure there. You can install themes through WP-CLI. You can even activate them straight away with a flag. You can change theme mod settings. The theme mods are often what gets set when you customize a theme in the customizer. For example, your header images, background colors, font sizes and font families, all that kind of stuff. You can set those settings directly in WP-CLI. You can also manage widgets and menus through WP-CLI. It's probably not as user-friendly as it is to use the admin area, because in the admin area we've got nice drag and drop and things. With WP-CLI it's much more technical, but if you need to automate this for some reason, then it's all in there. One thing you can't do though is you can't edit a theme. There's no theme or plugin editor in WP-CLI. Whether or not it should be there is up for discussion. Plugins, again, WP plugin list, WP plugin activate, WP plugin search is an interesting one. This interfaces with the WordPress.org plugin directory. So if you want to find a plugin that's for debugging, you can do WP plugin search debug bar. It will show you a list of results and you can install it straight away. Users, this is where WP-CLI starts to become really useful, because managing users, particularly on sites where you have a large number of users, can be a bit laborious. So for example, creating users, listing users by role, you can even update your own user account, you can set passwords. All these things are a little bit slow to do in the admin area if you need to do it for a large number of users. With WP-CLI you can start doing that much faster and in an automated fashion. Finally, settings. You can read any option from WP-CLI. You can update any option from WP-CLI. So for example, if you need to update the admin email address there, you just pass it in as a parameter. You can even search options. For example, if you want to see all of the registered thumbnail sizes on your site, you can put a little asterisk in there to do a kind of a wildcard search. And a bit of an odd one is WP rewrite structure. You can set the URL rewrite structure that is otherwise done from the permalinks settings screen. You can set that straight in WP-CLI. So this is really handy if you're setting up a new site and you've got a particular structure that you want to set up as part of the setup process. So they're all handy, but why do you really want to use WP-CLI to administer your site? What are the benefits of typing things out on the command line instead of pointing and clicking in the admin area? Well, the first one is WP-CLI is fast. These are the steps you need to do if you want to search for a plugin and install it from the admin area. You need to navigate to the admin area. Oh, I'm not logged in, and you enter username and password. You have to get to the right screen, do a search, find a plugin, click install, wait for it to download. It's a bit of a slow process. The corresponding process in WP-CLI is to type that. WP plugin install, plugin name, and then -- activate. And this will take a few moments to download the plugin, install it, and activate it. Bam, you're done. This gets even easier the more plugins that you install at once. You can just list space-separated list of plugins here, and it will go and download all of them at once and install them all in one go. So it's a big time saver. WP-CLI is also efficient when you start working at scale. This is a command that updates all of the users who have got example.com in their email address, and it reduces their role down to a subscriber. So imagine if you wanted to do that manually on a site, you would have to search the user screen, you would have to manually go into every single user account, click there, drop down to subscriber, hit save. This command here will run through every single user on your site and perform that command. And this gets more efficient the larger your site is and the more users that you've got. Saves you a lot of time. There's some benefits that you might not immediately think of. WP-CLI can enhance the security of your site. This constant here is a special one that you can set in your config file. It's called disallow file mods. If you set that in your config file, it will disallow the plugin installer and the plugin editor, the theme installer and the theme editor. It will disallow users from doing updates, installing languages, all that kind of stuff. But WP-CLI is unaffected by this constant. So if you put this in place on your site, you can actually strictly control what users can do on your site. So you can prevent them from installing brand new plugins or editing themes in the theme editor, but you still have control over that yourself through the command line. So for example, if I want to install a new language, I can do WP call language install in the language name. So the control for that has now shifted away from the admin area and onto the person who's administering the server with WP-CLI. Again, for plugin updates, installing new themes, all of these you'll no longer be able to do in the admin area, so everything is nice and safe and controlled, but WP-CLI doesn't pay any attention to this constant, so you can administer your site as normal. You can also administer broken and slow websites with WP-CLI. How many people have had a WordPress website where there's 50 plugins on there and you visit the admin area and you get a whole bunch of notices saying everything's out of date and it takes 10 seconds for the screen to load? I'm sure most of you have had that. There's an interesting flag on WP-CLI called skip plugins. So if you type a command, for example, WP plugin list, and you pass in the skip plugins flag, it will list all of that data, but it won't load the plugins while you do it. So your site won't be slow as it is in the admin area. You can also pass in a particular plugin slug if you only want to skip loading one particular problematic plugin. And the same thing for themes, although a little bit less useful. This is great for plugins that have got fatal errors in them as well. If it's completely impossible to access the admin area through a fatal error, you can still use WP-CLI because you can pass in the skip plugins flag and it will skip loading plugins. And the reason this works is because WP-CLI loads before WordPress does. So if you're in the mindset of WordPress plugins, what happens is WordPress loads and then it loads the plugin. Well, WP-CLI is the other way around. WP-CLI loads WordPress. So it's able to control things such as the loading of plugins and themes and options and files. So you can do this kind of thing. You can also enforce the inclusion of a particular PHP file. This is handy for fixing up things. For example, if you've got some actions or filters that are misbehaving, you can include a PHP file. That file will get included before the command is run. It's great for, again, fixing fatal errors. And there's a debug mode, and this will show you all of the PHP errors and warnings and notices and things that are otherwise hidden when you're using WP-CLI. So quick interlude. I want to get a few answers from some of you. What do you do repeatedly on your site that you ought to be able to automate? I've already given a partial example there of setting up a WordPress site to begin with. If you build lots of sites for clients, you know, the whole process of installing WordPress, putting some plugins and themes on there. Has anybody got any ideas of what other things you do on a regular basis in WordPress that you really think, oh, I should be able to automate this? Any ideas from anyone? Surely there's some laborious process. Gary, down here.
It wasn't a regular thing, it was something I had to do this week. A client had a whole load of blog posts where the featured image was also the first image in the post content.
Yep.
So I had to go through to one blog posts. They weren't a bit before that, but I see if you want to have that image tag for
Oh yeah. Yep.
post content. That would be automated.
Yeah. So you could have used WP-CLI for that. You would have to weigh up the time that you spend scripting it with the time that you would save doing it manually. So again, the kind of the larger your site is and the more posts you've got, then the more benefit there is to write in a WP-CLI or a script that uses WP-CLI to do it. What I would probably do there is something along the lines of looping through all of the posts, fetching the featured image, fetching the URL for that image, and then having a look to see if it appears in the post content. And if it is, then use maybe some regular expression to pull that out, do a search replace on the content and resave the post. So yeah, if you weigh up the time that you would need to spend kind of writing that and tweaking it with the time that you save actually manually doing it, then yeah, you could do that with WP-CLI, definitely. Yeah. Anyone? Hello?
Is there a way of automating the spam comments?
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So if you've got the Akismet plugin on your site, which is a spam, what do you call it, a spam catching plugin, for want of a better word, Akismet actually includes its own WP-CLI commands, which I think WP Akismet, not sure, I'll need to check that. And that allows you to rescan comments for spam. So if your comments have been on the site for a while, you can actually rescan them. And it could be that Akismet's database has been updated since they were last scanned, and they might easily say, oh yeah, that's spam or that's not spam. So you can do that if you've got the Akismet plugin.
There is a Kismet, but
Mhm.
sometimes
Yeah.
get
Yeah, I mean, I guess,
some sort of a filter.
yeah.
You can-
I guess that probably depends, again, how comfortable you are writing your own scripts and whether you think the time writing a script is worth the benefit compared to using the admin area to manage your comments. Yeah, you could probably come up with something that listed all of the comments. Maybe if you wanted to do it interactively on the command line, you could loop through all of the unapproved comments or even all of the approved comments and prompt the user to enter yes or no to decide whether it's spam or not. But automating the detection of spam, I'm not sure. You would probably have to use a third-party service to decide whether or not the comment is spam or not. Yeah, you could probably do something along there with WP-CLI. Yeah. Anyone else? Hello, Johnny.
First of all, I've written a budget to do what
Great.
Did you tell me about it last week?
I'll get my story. So, what I'm going to speak for a little moment of 50,000 users with GDPR when I'm about to store personal data
Uh-huh.
on our laptops. So I've written a command to go to clear out all the user data.
Oh, yeah.
So it's going through, clear out all their comments, clear out everything.
That-
For other users, subscriber users.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I can run that in circle overnight and get data as well.
That's a really good use case. Yeah, GDPR, clearing out user, what do they call it? User identifiable, no, personally identifiable information. Yeah. Yeah, so that is a really good good use case for something that you probably need to do on a continual basis as well. It's not just a one-off. If you've had people leaving comments or people signing up and you need to scrub that data, then yeah, a really efficient way to do that is through WP-CLI.
Another good use case, especially for managing lots of client projects, you can have aliases and user destination.
Mhm.
You could write an automated script for this with all your client sites and say, I want to update WordPress, what's 200 sites, I want to update all the plugins.
Yep.
Script that,
Mhm.
the user
Yeah.
do that on WordPress.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to mention aliases in a little bit as well, so we'll cover that. Oh, in fact, the next slide. Good segue. Good segue. It was almost like that was scripted. Yeah, so this is a really neat piece of functionality in WP-CLI. You could administer remote sites. So typically, when you use WP-CLI, it operates on the site that is local to the machine that you're on. It supports this syntax here called aliases. And what this does is, in your configuration file for WP-CLI, you can set up an alias, and then you can use it to target that site when you run a command. So, for example, this alias here called trunk, this is a local alias, so this simply specifies a path to somewhere else on my machine. So if I run a command such as wp at trunk and then a command, instead of operating that command against the site that is in the current directory that I'm in, it will operate it against the site that's found at this directory. I use this for installing plugins and things on different development sites that I'm working on. But you can also do it remotely, as Johnny said there. So for example, in this configuration here called @blog, I've got the SSH credentials for my remote website, which is hosted at example.com. Pass in the username, the host name, and then the path to where your site is located on that server. Whenever I run, for example, wp @blog plugin install and a plugin name, WP-CLI will actually open an SSH connection to that remote server. It will navigate to that directory, it will run the command, it will return the results, and then it will disconnect from the SSH connection. So it saves you having to manually go and find your SSH connection details, open the connection, navigate to the right directory. It's really a big time saver. And it also supports Vagrant boxes, so if you've got Vagrant and Docker as well, actually, if you use Vagrant or Docker boxes locally on your machine, you can simply give it the Vagrant name or the Docker name. When you run wp @ and the alias name there, it will run that command against that site. Interestingly, what Johnny was saying there is about being able to run the command against multiple sites. So if you want to update WordPress on 1,000 websites, you can use the all syntax, and this is a special alias which refers to all of the aliases that you've configured in your config file. So say you've got 1,000 client websites on 1,000 different servers, you could do wp @ all and then core update or core check update, and it will go and run that command on all of those sites at once. It's going to take a while because it has to open an SSH connection for each one, but it's quicker than you having to do it manually. So this configuration is pretty straightforward. These SSH credentials are the same as what you would have in your SSH config file. If you want to find out more about this syntax, then it's all on the WP-CLI handbook on the WPCLI.org site. Another good use case is for converting a site to HTTPS. So if you do a regular search replace on some content in WordPress, you find that it might mess up a few things, because in some places in WordPress it stores URLs in a serialized array in a database. Most common one is widget options. If you've got a widget and one of the values in the options is a URL and you do a search replace, it can break that if you do a standard search replace in MySQL. So WP-CLI has a search replace command, and you can give it, for example, to convert this site to HTTPS, you can give it an HTTP URL and an HTTPS URL, and it will go and scan all of the database tables on your WordPress site, and it will do a search replace, but the important thing is it will be aware of serialized data, so it doesn't break serialized data. And again, this has got a more of a benefit the larger your site gets. So if you've got a brand new website, well, it might not be a problem to do a regular SQL search replace. If you've got a website with 10 years worth of content, 200,000 posts, 500 users, this command saves you a lot of time. So this is a great way to convert your site to HTTPS and not have any broken or old HTTP links on there. Another time saver is quickly connecting to MySQL. There's a shortcut you can use called WP-CLI, and this will open up an SQL connection for your site according to the database credentials that you've got in your config file. So it will read database name, the username, the password, and the host, and then you can go and run any MySQL command, for example here, to read the fields, and it saves you having to go and dig out those credentials to open up a MySQL connection. You can actually blog via the CLI. You probably wouldn't want to, but you can. There's a few commands. WP post create. This creates a post, but there's a special flag called edit. You put -- edit on there. Again, it will open your configured editor. So usually on the command line that will be Vim or Emacs or whatever, but you can configure it to use your text editor if you like. And the same for editing a post. There's a WP edit command. You give it a post ID, and again it will open up the editor that you've configured, and it will allow you to edit the post content, save it, and it immediately saves that post in WordPress. There's a good page on the WP-CLI.org site called Shell Friends. A lot of the real power of WP-CLI is not really running these commands in isolation. It's actually chaining them together with other commands. So for example, using interpolation here, where you run a command called WP-PostList and get all of the IDs, and then you send that into the WP-PostDelete command, and it will loop through all of those posts and delete them. And the piping here, this is called a pipe. This allows you to put the output of one command into the input of another command, and this is a handy one that will go and download and install every single available language pack for WordPress. So if you read the Shell Friends page on the WP-CLI.org site, it will kind of introduce you to some of the foundational concepts of the command line, not necessarily only related to WP-CLI. And that's really when you start to be able to write some powerful commands that really do good things for you. Again, WP-CLI.org. I also run a newsletter, which is supposed to be monthly, but I managed to do it every 2 months so far, called WP-CLI.tips. So it's an unofficial newsletter, but if you want to find out some more kind of interesting use cases for WP-CLI and some tutorials, you can sign up at WP-CLI.tips. And are there any questions? And thanks for listening.
John, thank you very much. We do have time
We have
for
time?
a couple of questions.
Okay.
We have any at all?
Any questions?
Okay, I'll kick off.
Right.
Is there anything, looking at the command line can be a little bit daunting for somebody who's maybe never used it before? Where would you kind of recommend starting out if you're going to go into using
Yeah, that is a good question. So sort of what I was getting at a little bit at the end here, if you go onto the WP-CLI site, you'll see a page on there called Shell Friends. If you go to the handbook, there's a page on there called Shell Friends. It will introduce you to some of the simple concepts of using the command line, such as piping and stuff. That's probably a good place to start because it also links out to a few other resources for using the command line. So I would say probably check out that page on the handbook, Shell Friends, good place to start. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Hello?
That WP edit, does that only work on the page editor, or will that work on other page builders like Disallow or other platforms?
I'm not sure where I had that. It's here somewhere. Here it is. So what these commands do is they open up a text editor with the post content in them. So the only field that you can edit using this command is the post content. So if you want to edit the title, you have to pass that in via a flag. So if you have a page builder on your site and it stores that data in the post content, when you run this command, it's going to show you the built data from that page builder. So because obviously you're on the command line, you're not going to get the actual drag and drop and page builder functionality, but you'll be able to edit the underlying data that those page builders generate. So you can actually use this to fix broken data. If, like, for example, if you're using a page builder and for some reason the data has become corrupted or whatever, and you can't use the page builder, it gives you an error, you can use WP post edit and it will bring up the raw HTML from the post content, and maybe you could find out what the problem is, fix it, save it, and then from there you can then go back into the real editor in the admin area and start using your page builder again. So yeah, this is just for the post content field.
Thank you.
Any more? Oh, we've got a guy up here. Hello. Oh, good question. Oh, I should have covered that. So WordPress multi-site, yeah. It plays very well with WordPress multi-site. When you run a command on a WordPress multi-site installation, if you just run the regular command, for example WP post list, that command runs against the main site on your multi-site network, so whichever one you set up first. If you want to run the command against a different site on your multi-site network, you need to pass in the URL using a URL parameter. Let me just quickly bring this up and I'll give you a quick show. Should be able to see this. Can you see that? So for example, if I do post list and then --URL, can you all see that? It's hidden down the bottom there. --URL equals, and then the URL of my site is like that, I think. Maybe we'll get some details. Here we are. So this has listed the posts from the site that is found at this address, and then I think I've got another site at 2 maybe. There we are, and well, the posts are the same here, but maybe that's not working. Let's have a look. Oslo, and I've got one on there called Oslo. Ah, you get the idea. But you get the idea. That's why I didn't do a live demo. So the idea is, anyway, that you pass in --URL and the URL to the site, and it will pull in the posts and whatever for that particular site. There are some commands in WP-CLI that operate on the whole network via a --network flag. For example, you can network activate a plugin by using the --activate -network flag, I think, and that activates it across the whole network. So yeah, it works completely with multi-site, except when you're doing a live demo in front of an audience. Yeah.
John, thank you very much. I'm probably out of time for questions, but thank you very much.